I mean, outside of comic books, though, something that I find particularly intriguing is that it immediately sets the debate of the way up between freedom and being secure. Security and freedom, something has to give.
Which is what we're currently living through with our lockdown. Oh, we've got a police state telling us what we can do, even going out to visit relatives and things like that. So,
well, if the current government was judges, they can do what they want, though, can't they? So it's okay. It's just us who can't.
Well, the judges can generally do what they want in a lot of stories, but
Diane Abbott would have been a great judge.
Citizens of the world, you are under my control.
I gave it.
Do you know what Tamagotchi means?
What?
Little monster egg.
Little monster egg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, tamago is Japanese for egg.
Right. And chi is for little monster.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm not buying this. Hello, listeners and viewers, and welcome to the second edition of the Megaverse podcast, in which we'll be looking at the Judge Dredd classic book, America, written by John Wagner and illustrated by Colin MacNeil. So, Kieran, what was America about?
Well, I've read part one so far.
We're just looking at part one. You're safe.
It's quite a lengthy tome to go through at the moment. But part one I found really intriguing so far. I found it intriguing in a number of ways. One, it's interesting that it's now cross-genre. So it's gone from sort of sci-fi to being a bit of a film noir. And I quite like that. Okay. I like the themes so far. The themes being that there is never a happy ending, which is a common convention, of course, in film noir.
Yeah.
Also, because I don't want to give too much away, of course, for people that haven't read it, but I'm sure everyone has.
No, we can do. Spoiler warning. There will be spoilers. Yeah.
Oh, there's a massive spoiler. I mean,
yeah.
We'll talk about that a bit later on, I think.
Dave, do you want to have an attempt at explaining what America's about?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'd just like to thank Alan Holloway for suggesting this, because he suggested
thank you, Alan.
That Kieran would benefit from reading it. So big thanks to Alan. And America is it's fascinating because for so many years before this was produced, building up slowly towards showing just how authoritarian and fascist the judges were, you sort of got to see the other side of the democracy movements coming in. And it culminated in this, and it did carry on afterwards, but this was a huge sea change for Judge Dredd, as Kieran mentioned itself. It did move into the noir side as well, but it was also it was in the launch issue for the Judge Dredd magazine as well, issue number 1. So it was hugely popular at the time, sold a ton of copies. And I think for most people it was interesting because the people who grew up with 2000 AD from the start were now young adults. So the tone of this is quite more adult from the 2000 AD progs, which were aimed more at sort of teenagers. I myself was 17 when this came out, or just coming up to 17. And it blew my mind because I wasn't used to these kind of tones in 2000 AD. And it tells a story of a love story, basically, a doomed love story, sadly. And just how far someone can go with unrequited love, and just how far someone can actually manipulate that person as well.
Most love stories are doomed, really, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But not the thing I like in this, the three main characters you've got are Judge Dredd as a sort of overarching figure, and then you've got the story of Bennett Beanie and America. And all three are absolute arseholes in it. And I think it's quite interesting to see how the three work amongst themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, if I can just add in there. I agree with David. I was actually really impressed with the complexity of the story.
His dad. He's gone from Dave to David in a few. What's he done something wrong? You're telling him off.
Sorry, Dave. You done, Julius? Yeah. So anyway, you can edit that out.
I'm not.
I would go along with what. I'll go along with what Dave was saying. I was impressed, genuinely impressed by the complexity of the story and the skillful way that the story is being told. And bear in mind, I've not gone past part 1 yet because I wanted to read solely that to concentrate on that for this podcast. I liked that it was a love story. I like that it was a doomed love story in a sci-fi setting in a film noir. So it's really crossed genres there. It's really fascinating. I thought it was intriguing that there's a metaphor there, of course, with America being the girl there who has sacrificed herself and everything else and gets killed, and of course America the state. I thought that was kind of fun as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's worth saying, Kieran, I know you're not a big comics reader, and obviously you don't know the history of this, but when America came out in the 90s, it wasn't a series. There was just one story. Right. And so when you say the first part, that is a self-contained story on its own. And it was only really because of its success and its popularity that the editor got John Wagner to write a follow-up to it.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So it's worth reading as a self-contained story, which is why we're addressing, even though in the volume that we've looked at, which is the Mega Collection volume, which is a great book. It contains all three of the America stories and some extra stuff as well. Even though it's the whole, all three stories are in there, it's really a self-contained story on its own, and that's why we're looking at it in that way.
In that case, then, that's actually really interesting. So I might get even more from it.
I thought it was good for me. Sorry, I thought it was good for me because when I left reading 2000 AD around about 1993, and I'd only ever read the first America. And when I got back into it about 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't even know there was a second and third part, and I only read them when I read all this together. And it was interesting. I found it interesting for myself how much the first part still affects me, whereas the second and third parts I didn't enjoy as much. But the first part is so powerful. I thought it was magnificent.
It almost calls out to be collected in a large volume book on its own. I know we're not talking about the second and third parts, but I assume most of the people watching will have read them, or if they haven't read them and they get the book, they will eventually read them, because it is a book worth getting. Just to say straight off, it's one of the best Judge Dredd books. But even though they add to the story and the follow up is great, it kind of, having the story, them all together, kind of detracts from the power of the first book, I think, of America on its own. Sort of a large volume, really well scanned version of that would be a great book to have.
Funny enough, Dale Jackson owns all the original art for it, and he showed me them, a lot of the BBCs at Lawless, and it's just incredible. And it's the pages are absolutely huge. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Dave, that's really interesting. I was just thinking, as you're saying that, about the artwork. I don't really have the skills yet or the tools to say whether a piece of art in this case is really good. But one thing I felt was that the imagery was cinematic. It had that sort of that large scope. This one here, I don't know. You can see it well.
Yeah, that page is just incredible in real life.
Yeah, it is astonishing. I mean, this page anyway, but it adds so much.
Well, this story was kind of the lead story in the Judge Dredd magazine when it launched, which was it was a spin-off Judge Dredd comic from 2000 AD, with the idea that it would be aimed at a sort of an older age group. So whereas 2000 AD was going to continue for kids, even though some of the stories were kind of getting more and more, most of the stories were getting more and more sort of teenager, adult-based. The idea of the magazine would be aimed at that kind of late teens, sort of mid to late teens adult market. That since Watchmen had been published, everybody said, "Oh, comics are no longer for kids anymore." So that some of the themes and concepts in America are sort of adult themes and concepts, and although a lot of writers, when they started to try and do adult stories, they felt like sort of A-level adult stories where someone has like, oh, let's do a story about poverty, and then they do like this really sort of lame story. America, I think, does stand up as actually being a story that adults can read and enjoy.
Yeah, when I interviewed Steve McManus at Lawless in 2019, I was speaking to him about it, and I asked him what his he felt his greatest achievement was, and I wasn't expecting this at all, but he genuinely said that the production of the Judge Dredd magazine, including issue 1, he said that was his greatest achievement, because he thought that was the one that everything fired on all cylinders and worked completely. And so it was brilliant. That was. I'm just gonna read a little bit from the first 2 pages because I think they're quite important.
Yeah, let's jump into it.
It's the first 2 pages. So I'm just gonna say it starts with Dredd standing on a flag, the American flag, and he says,
"Where do I stand? I'll tell you where I stand. I stand 4 square for justice. I stand for discipline, good order, and the rigid application of the law, and good help any limp-wristed liberals who say different."
And then it continues on where he's talking about rights, and he says, I'm all for rights, but not at the expense of order, which says a lot about Dredd himself. And then it pans back, like Kieran said, cinematically, and you've got the flag draped over the body of somebody, and Dredd standing on it, and behind him is the Statue of Justice looming over the Statue of Liberty, which I've always found a really interesting juxtaposition, showing how authoritarian has defeated democracy throughout the years. And Dredd says,
"Justice has a price. The price is freedom."
And I think that's just, for an opening 2 pages, that's just about as good as anything Wagner's written, certainly for 2008.
And one thing that I really liked about that, I really liked how it rapidly established the character of Dredd. It rapidly established the environment in which he's in.
Yeah.
Within minutes, well, seconds, really.
And being the opening story,
really
of course,
skillful writing.
In a new magazine, as this would have appeared,
yeah,
it's so skillful that it will bring a new reader in and say, look, here is, I've explained pretty much all you need to know for this story about Judge Dredd and his world here in these 2 pages. And now let's get into a love story that's completely without Judge Dredd for most of the story. But the judges just are a factor that's always looming over everything in their lives. It's a great start. But I always thought it should have started, where do I stand? I'll tell you where I stand. I'm standing on a flag, aren't I? Because he's standing on the flag, isn't he?
I get that.
Might not have been the same emotional opening. But it'd have been a laugh, wouldn't it?
They may have been talking about it in 30 years' time. You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of comic books, though, something that I find particularly intriguing is that it immediately sets the debate of the way up between freedom and being secure. Security and freedom, something has to give. Which
is what we're currently living through with our lockdown. No, you've got a police state telling us what we can do, even going out to visit relatives and things like that. So,
well, if the current government was judges, they can do what they want, though, can't they? So it's okay. It's just us who can't.
Well, the judges can generally do what they want in a lot of stories, but
Diane Abbott would have been a great judge.
She's gone. Yeah. You can't drag her up now. She's part of the old.
Coming back.
I will say Keir Starmer would make a great judge because he's got the law background, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he's got the chin.
Looks like Morrissey.
Morrissey would have made a great judge.
Yeah.
Well, he's a fascist, isn't he? apparently.
Yes, you are.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
So I hear.
So Judge Morrissey opens up. He's draped in the England flag, and Morrissey's got a song called "America." America's not the world, doesn't he?
Do you think if Morrissey was a judge, one of the settings on his lawgiver would be to fry daffodils?
He'd stopped the daffodil thing, didn't he? It went out of fashion. When everyone started doing the daffodil and the hearing aid, he stopped it.
I always remember when I was at a sixth form party, there was a kid. I didn't really know Morrissey because I wasn't interested in boring stuff like that. I like it. There was a kid who looked exactly like Morrissey, but I didn't really know who Morrissey was. And he danced with daffodils hanging out in his back pockets, and I just wanted to beat the shit out of him, to be honest. But
Daffodils out of his back pocket.
That's what Morrissey used to wear.
Yeah, he looked such a twat. Sorry,
It sounds like an old court thing where chaps would walk around with a hanky out of their back pocket.
It looked similar. Yeah, it was about as masculine.
It was a fashion statement.
Yeah, the girls loved it.
Yeah. So anyway, let's move on from this. Right. So America, right, which is the book we're looking at.
Are we?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Good.
So yeah, you have this establishment of this the fascist state that the judges have, and that people are still going about their normal everyday lives, their loves, but children are being born, etc. And what did you think of the love story? Did it convince you? You've got Beanie and his almost worrying obsession with America.
I think Beanie is a bit of an incel. That's what we would call them today.
Yeah,
he's a bit of an incel. He reminded me a little bit of Ricardo Lopez. You know, the Bjork stalker.
Okay.
He had this. Beanie seemed to have this codependent faux relationship with America, which creeped me out a little bit. And so he had to sort of show people by, becoming a great big star instead, and he still couldn't ban her. Well, he did in the end, but
that was all planned, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a trick. Yeah. It was so creepy when that
happened. So it's interesting because in a film noir convention, when you look at the characters in a film noir, there's always, and excuse the language, but it's a common term. There's always the tart with the heart. That's the private investigator's like secretary or friend who's a loving person, and there's a femme fatale. The sexy one sort of smoking in a corner, and she's kind of dangerous. America seemed to end up playing both roles.
Yeah,
which I found really, really interesting. So another interesting part of it that makes me think there's a very strong film noir crossover, apart from the femme fatale tart with the heart bit, is the ambush later on that came as a surprise. That's a very sort of well-known convention, of course, in film noir. And the beauty that I came across in this was that John Wagner very elegantly, poetically, was able to weave those conventions.
I always thought it was such a shame as well, because when I was reading it on a monthly basis, or was it even fortnightly? Either way, whenever it was coming out, I really, being 17 and obviously in the flush of hormones, I really, really wanted America to be a nicer person. And it didn't destroy me, but it really upset me that it turned out that she was like quite self-serving in herself, especially when she's so heroic as a child sticking up for Beanie, which obviously led to Bennett falling in love with her. And then as time goes on, she just manipulates him completely. And weirdly enough, because he's manipulated so much, he then becomes a manipulator himself. And it's a real toxic relationship between the two of them. It's fascinating to read. And thoroughly intelligent and adult in its tone. But I remember reading it as like an early teenager, 17 or so, or whatever, and thinking, God, this is really bad. And also a lot like some of the friendships I had as a kid, not quite to the degree of what happened, but like when you fall in love so much as a teenager with someone, and they just see you as a friend. And you push yourself, and he's proper friend zoned in it. And I think it's fascinating how Wagner did it. Particularly, this is a guy who's like in his 40s writing this. Just genius.
Yeah, and it's perfectly aimed at that audience that would have been reading as well. I'm sure a lot of people in that age group, as you say, would have been experiencing similar sort of things with relationships. But then again, you say America is using him, but maybe she is, but then maybe he is just a part of her goal to get to take down the judges and get democracy within America again, which is he may be just a tool in doing that, but her real love is for freedom and America. So while he's obsessed with her, they're both obsessed with America in a way. So it's
you can see going back right to the start where America's facing up against this judge who's there, and she's telling him who she is, and she says, I can say what I like because my dad says this is America and it's a free country. And the judge replies, yeah, what century is he living in? This isn't America anymore. This is Mega City 1, and your old man have got a lot to learn. That, once again, it's just introducing so much new stuff to people who are just picking up the comic. They can really see just where this city's going.
And the dad does eventually learn that he's broken. He doesn't believe in America anymore.
One thing that I do want to say about the writing, actually, is regards to her dad, and the way that John Wagner has written the accent.
Yeah.
The dad is clearly Hispanic, but it's written like as though you would write for Manuel in Fawlty Towers.
Manuel Towers, how are you?
The language was often of its time with John Wagner, to be fair.
Right.
Never overtly racist, but certainly using a lot of stereotypes. We'll read Robo.
Times have changed.
Yeah.
Times have changed. As we will see when we get towards the end, I'm sure. So yeah, but the dreams that everyone has in it, it's quite a depressing story, isn't it? They all kind of die.
Yeah, that is a really typical film noir convention, of course. Yeah, and this is why I'm so strong in it, because he has dealt with the genre in such a skillful way in writing that it's a good demonstration of how masterful he is of his craft to be able to do that. I mean, it's really tough when you've got genres that have got things that you expect. You always expect, for example, in a film noir, there's an office, a detective's office. In the drawer, there's a bottle of scotch and a handgun and all this other kind of stuff. Whereas what John Wagner has done is he sort of kept the spirit of that, but he's changed things around in a very exciting way.
Yeah.
Do you think there would be a difference in the impact of the story if the art hadn't been so amazing? Do you think
definitely.
Because the art is just absolutely incredible. But the story really does shine for you. I'm so glad that the art was so good, because I do wonder if if it had been a different artist of a lesser standard, whether it would have had the long-term appeal it has.
Well, one of the things that Colin MacNeil does so well is that his art elevates the story. So his character designs, his facial expressions, the way that he because John Wagner's scripts are generally quite sort of, they don't give much detail, so the artist can then take that and help with the pacing of the story. So he really does make the emotional scenes slow down with his art. His use of colour in there, it starts off really bright and it's sunny, and he's around this time, Colin MacNeil's painting had this this level of kind of sunshine that existed in Mega City 1. It did feel like America when you were looking at it. A lot of artists draw it as being quite dull like England, but it's really sunny. And then as it goes through, it progressively gets darker and darker until you get to the night and the nightclubs at the end, and the sun is all gone from everything. And so the art just really draws you into the themes of the story, almost subconsciously as well. It's only when you start trying to look at it. Of course, the art looks amazing when you look at it as individual pages, and when you're reading it, it works so well. There's no bits in it where you go, I can't tell what's going on here, which is always something that you get with when the art's not too good. But here, it's just, you can just sort of glide through. But then when you go back and start looking at it in detail, you go, oh, look at how amazing, like, just the backgrounds are, and how there's all the graffiti and everything looks run down, and how sort of, when you see people just having a discussion, you can see judges in the background or graffiti about judges, which kind of shows their presence in everyone's lives constantly, how oppressive everything is. It really is amazing art.
For me, certainly, the art had that architectural quality about it, as the script did, in the sense that it was very nuanced, and you'd see how it was very planned. And I would say that the art fits the script perfectly, in that it is cinematic, like I mentioned earlier on, that the framing, it looks like there's a director of photography there that has framed the shots, especially for the script, which is what you'd want in a film, certainly. And it's where I think that the artist has painted with light, and in doing so, it sort of gave it that big feel, that big impact.
Yeah, it's a great panel layouts throughout as well. It's really the choice of panel layouts is stunning, because there's actually quite a lot of panels in it, and it just works. You know, it's the storytelling is just fantastic from that.
Unfortunately, in this book, it's good printing, but it's not the best printing. I had another version of this, the first printing of it, and although the pages started falling out, the actual size was bigger. It was more like the original published size, and it was the colours were a lot stronger. The scans were much better. But yeah, like I say, this would benefit from having kind of a large size, sort of prestige volume scanned from the original art. But it's probably never going to happen. But
I'd be surprised. Yeah,
I'd be very surprised if it happens. But what I do have is my own version of one of the pages that I painted when I was a teenager. I love this story so much.
Very good.
Oh yeah, you can see there.
not bad at all.
Yeah, spent a long time.
As a newbie, by the way, there's a question that I've been meaning to ask about Judge Dredd.
Okay.
Why is more than a third of his face made up of his lower mandible?
He's got a big old chin.
No, it's not just big. It's deformed.
Yeah.
His face is like more than a third of it is chin. I mean, what's all that about?
Family trait.
It is a family trait. Yeah. At one point, his cousins turn up and they all have enormous chins.
Even bigger, because they're all mutated, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, because basically Judge Dredd is a clone. He's cloned from the who's known as the father of justice, Judge Fargo, Eustace Fargo, his name is, and he has a massive chin. But Carlos Esquero, he does tend to draw men with big chins, so it wasn't a big surprise. And I think that obviously not keeping with the same artist all the time, people have took that on board, and over years it's become more and more exaggerated. I mean, if you see some of the stuff Jake Lynch draws now, I mean, there's no way that he'd be able to eat properly with his chin. It looks great, but it's the jaw and the chin line.
It's like Desperate Dan.
Yeah.
Well, he's starting to look like he's got this Habsburg jaw. you know, that deformity that ran through the Habsburg family,
I don't know that.
where it just became massive, massively huge jaw. So much so that they couldn't eat properly,
Right.
had a huge underbite, and they would end up making like that because
Don't
the
do
jaw
that,
was so
Wes.
deformed.
Maybe just
No, but I'm saying that's how they would.
I don't have to edit
Not-
that bit out.
Red,
So.
Dredd might
I'm
talk
not
like that.
making
We'd
fun.
never know.
I'm not making fun.
So yeah, with the love story continues, which is a great love story. You can argue like who is in the right, who is in the wrong. I guess it depends on your political ideals. Personally, even the first time I read it, I was on the judge's side. I don't like terrorism. I think it's bad. Okay. I don't know what you two think, but
I'm not a fan. No.
No, and I think it's and also I didn't like Beanie being a snitch either. So but I was glad he did it because he got them all killed at the end, which was good because I don't like terrorists.
At that age when it came out, I was supporting the judges because Judge Dredd could do no wrong. But even then, I could see that there was no excuse for what they were doing, but you could see why they'd be pushed to that. And I think that was testament to the writing because I had no interest in anything like that at that time.
Terrorism.
Yeah.
But you've changed
now, obviously, I've got more of an interest, not personally, but reading.
It's financial support, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Is that what you're admitting to?
Yeah, well, I often take a bucket round pubs, like just shake it down here. So, but yeah, I just think reading it now, you can see that all three angles of it, that they're all equally wrong and to a degree right as well. And I think that's the testament to the story of how nuanced it is, that there is no right and wrong in it. It just given the fact that the artwork is so colourful, it's interesting that there are so many shades of grey within it.
Yeah,
and it's done a good job.
That's a good pull quote there. I remember when I remember an hour ago when I just read it. It's hard these days. But when he said that bit about why did you kill them all? You could have just arrested them on the way. And he's like, oh, we're in show business as well. I was like,
oh, that was a great line.
That's great. Yeah.
That was actually really funny as well.
Yeah. The humour is amazing. It's so funny. There's so many funny bits in it.
Yeah, you can see that Wagner's definitely a humorist throughout all his stories. I mean, he's got a one for such a dour man. You'd think his turn of phrase and right sense of humour is wonderful, isn't it?
But there's
sorry, carry on.
One of the things that's really interesting is, having read the later story, which I know you haven't read, Kieran, is that this story is kind of about the death of the American dream and the fact that the judges are now in charge. But there's still that glimmer of hope there, that people are still pushing back against it, trying to fight against it. And as we see later in Judge Dredd, when John Wagner's writing, obviously not when the other writers are writing, Judge Dredd mellows as a character. He becomes more progressive as he gets older. He relaxes his views on mutation and mutants' rights within the city. He approaches democracy differently in later stories. And eventually we have, if you just want to cover your ears, Kieran, so it doesn't ruin the story for you later. I'm just saying.
Go for it.
We have Beanie's child join the judges. So what you really have there is you have two strands of America within here. You have a Beanie who becomes successful and rich and kind of breaks out of that oppression through his wealth. And then you have America who goes the other route, and she tries to fight the system. Rather than joining with the system, she tries to fight against it. And she ends up penniless, scared, sort of becoming a murderer and worried about her life. And then they come together, and their joining is kind of a bit like how most terrorist funding works, where rich people pay the poor people, but without the without the political drive, Beanie doesn't have the political drive to actually fund that, which is why and his own anger is why he reveals it. But then when you have the child joining the judges, what you basically have is like all of her sort of personality is contained within that child, both of their personalities, and now it's been subsumed by the system. So it's kind of a way of fighting the system from within. So really, if America had have joined the judges, would the whole thing have been completely different? Could she have taken that passion into a more progressive way from into
especially with how John Wagner and some of the other writers have wrote Judge Beanie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly one of the best supporting characters there's ever been in the Judge Dredd unit. She's the
AOC of Justice Department, isn't she?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a good thing.
John Wagner predicting the future again.
Again, but I thought it was quite interesting now that this is the start of where Total War starts coming into it. And Kieran, if you eventually you'll get to the point where you see a lot more Total War stories, including one epic all of its own. And the Total War certainly. I mean, if you were to say that an analogy of say something like the IRA to the British government, the Total War carry on for many years, and there's still a threat to a certain degree today.
Yeah,
they're trotting out every now and again.
Post 9/11, they become quite a regular feature.
Yeah,
good.
As a Buddhist, Kieran, what's your stance on terrorism?
Bad.
But as a free Tibet person,
yeah,
are you still opposed to it? Do you like peaceful protest? Is that what you're into?
Yeah.
So no dousing yourself in petrol or anything like that?
I wouldn't recommend it.
Probably hurt, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm allergic to petrol, so I'd have to douse
It
myself.
would certainly smart for a few days, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Something less dangerous I'd have to put on me.
The thing that I find irritating, though, is when people think they're really smart by saying something like, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. When, of course, they're totally different things.
It's true, though, isn't it?
Don't you start.
Depends on the man.
Or woman.
And it's a bit sexist as well. It's a bit of an outdated concept. We need to sort of bring it into the 21st century, really.
Yeah.
So it should be one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
Yeah. What about people who can't fight?
Fuck 'em.
They need to learn.
Got to stand up for themselves. It's a war out there.
Speaking of which, what do are you opposed to the government's lockdown, forcing you to stay? Obviously, you're not, Dave. You're allowed to go out because you're a key worker.
I'm a big fan of it.
I've got to be frank and say I don't care, really.
I'd prefer if you were Kieran.
I don't really care. It's annoying that I can't go to the gym.
Well.
Otherwise, I don't really care, because much of what we see and experience with our senses is a mirage anyway. So
that is true.
Pointless.
Especially online, all that fake news.
Well, there's all that fake news, but there's also the fake news that we come across every day when we think about, does this person like me? Do they not like me? Have I offended this someone? Have I offended that someone? I'm worrying about this thing. You know, all these mental constructs are basically nonsense, empty of inherent existence.
So anyway, America. We the ending. What did you chaps think of the ending? So for those who don't know, what happens at the end is that America, his body is intact, but her brain is dead, and Beanie's body is damaged, but his brain is intact. So as a form of self-flagellation, he decides to have his brain put into her body, so that he is always reminded of the terrible thing that he did, and also, in a slightly creepy way, he gets to look at himself in the shower when he has a wash.
Yeah.
As a kid, I always thought he was just doing it in a pervy way. I'll be honest with you. I never ever thought of self-flagellation at all. I get what you're saying, but I never thought.
I don't buy that narrative at all. I think he is an autogynephile and he's a fetishist.
Really?
He does.
He does justify everything in his head throughout the story. Like his behaviour is quite possessive, and that he thinks that she somehow owes him her love just because he loves her.
Well, he now finally has totally and utterly consumed her and has total control. Something that he didn't have before.
Yeah. He's kind of a bit of a creep, really.
Yeah, he's pretty gross.
And he betrays her as well. And the reason he betrays her, I know he says it's because he can't let her kill people, but he wants her saved and the others dead, right? So it's not like he really cares about anyone. He does it because she had sex with him, and then he realizes that she didn't have sex with him because she loved him. She had sex with him as a way to get this money. And you can see there's that turning point where he gets really annoyed about it all. And then he...
controlling mechanism.
Yeah, and he starts getting the details off her. It's really a horrible person.
The ambush is fantastic, though, isn't it? If you get to the page of the ambush, I love the fact that the judges are actually firing down on the
so good.
People from inside the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, so good.
So clever.
I love that full page of that guy who, I think it's the one who shot him in the throat, just getting pulped by the bullets. It's such a great page.
Yeah. Absolutely cool.
You really cheer for fascism at that point, don't you? See, if they'd had lockdown, none of this would have happened.
Very true.
Yeah, but they probably would have been on Facebook sharing fake news.
That's true.
Instead of
maybe there was a good point. They should have let the Tutti Frutti virus carry on, and then people would have been safe.
Yeah,
that's one for you, Kieran. We'll do that one day, Kirsten.
Yeah, that's a great one. And then you can ask all the questions like, why can't they just fly?
And what happened to the meteor belt?
Yeah,
I think there's a few in-jokes here. Like,
You'll get that. You'll get that.
You'll get them eventually. You'll look back on this in like 5 years' time and you'll go, I'll get that joke.
Well, I'm still looking back on the fact that America was there, brain dead, everything else intact, and this bloke who was obsessed with her.
Not even a relative as well. The way he goes, oh, I'm her only relative. Well, you're not really. You're all she has left. I'm a friend. It's just because he's a rich guy he manages to get the body, I think.
Well, it's that. But it's also a bit Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
He's now made like a dress out of her flesh, her body, and everything. And he now owns her completely, so he can do what you like. He's utterly consumed her. Well, so he now gets ultimate validation.
But
and he probably stands in the mirror looking at his boobs.
And how obsessed must you be to actually be willing to give up your own body?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's quite important to most people. But he's willing to sacrifice that in order to control her body. That's scary stuff, really.
Well, my body's a temple, mate, so...
Yeah, satanic temple.
Mine is as well. It's crumbling and falling apart.
It's been the British Empire came in and stole all the important things from you years ago.
Do you want to know an interesting theory?
About the book, or are you going to go back into something that no one cares about?
About the book, yeah.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Well,
actually, no. Go on, carry on. Oh, right. You just shut off your video and you go. Kieran has left the chat.
Okay.
Well, fine. Yeah. Anyway, there was an academic called Modelsky who came up with this theory called the long cycle theory. And he put forward the idea that empires rise and fall every time over a period of like 70 to 90 years. I mean, is that a likely thing to happen in the 2000 AD megacity landscape?
Well, they had a story called Every Empire Falls.
Right.
That we should review sometime.
Do we have to?
It's interesting.
It's not one of my favourite.
Yeah.
No, it's an interesting point though, because George Modelsky presented a theory back, I think it was like 1987 now.
I can see Wikipedia reflect off your glasses.
And Julius would know.
Busted. Okay.
One thing I love about the end is that it's the closing line of and the humour in it of America is dead. This is the real world. Well, firstly, it's not the real world. It's a comic, so there's the joke there. And the second thing, America is dead. It's such a blunt line, but it's also that America, even though Beanie is now in her body, is dead. She no longer exists. It's him that exists. The body is just. It's the same as America, as Mega City 1 continues. It's still the body, but it's been replaced by the judges. It's a brilliant closing to the book. Really, really funny and really clever. You didn't read the end.
Yeah. I just
skipped that page.
I'm just looking at that bit with you, just to so that we're on the same page.
Same page. That's yeah.
As it were.
You got. Someone's calling. You got any thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, as you say about the America's Dead on the last page, I mean, just before that, he says about the great American dream and don't kid yourself. We tried it before, believe me, it doesn't work. You can't trust the people. And the interesting thing is that's probably the last time where Judge Dredd is actually thinking like that. Yeah. And you do see him becoming more and more aligned to the democracy movement. And I may be wrong, but I'd assume that other writers may have brought it a bit back more to the fascistic kind of way, because he was definitely moving along the path of
definitely with John Wagner writing. He's become a real progressive, and in fact, some of the stories are him butting up against the system, which is still maintain those ideas and won't change and won't move. And he's saying, no, we need to move with what the people want and how things are. And then another writer will come in and just write Judge Dredd as this crazy fascist who wants to imprison everybody and lock everybody up, and that's not what he wants. He doesn't want the citizens to be... He thinks that he's helping them. Of course he does. He is as indoctrinated to the system as everybody else, because he says that thing about if you give me the citizen, the Jew at 5, but that's exactly what happens to him as the judges. As a child, they're put into the system and they're utterly brainwashed about how this system is the best way.
Yeah, I think that might be... I think one of the ones coming up, we're definitely going to have to do Judge Dredd Origins, because I think Kieran will get a lot from that. And it does show how human Joe should be, because you can see what happened with Eustace. And I think that might be an interesting one for the future.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting then, because whilst Judge Dredd locks people up into the cubes and all that kind of thing, sometimes they're able to get out of the cubes, right?
Yeah.
Waiting
for this trite statement.
And everything else. But ultimately, I mean, it sounds like Judge Dredd is in a prison himself. How do you escape a prison with no bars?
That's the Paul quote there.
Got a couple of good ones so far.
Yeah. Do you know, what's great about this is it's America, right, may be dead, but we'll always have this book to remember her.
I miss her.
Jobless.
She was gorgeous. I fancied the pants off her, I'll be honest.
Oh, I'd totally
really bad thing to say, but I really fancied her as a 17.
That's what you should have got.
What I would have done was actually just brain dead, just lying there.
No, I was thinking that, but I thought there's no way I can say that, because it's the kind of thing that people would really hate. So I'm glad you said it.
It's basically what Beanie did.
Yeah, and to be fair, we're going on about how Bennett's terrible, but I think if we were teenagers, we were all
I wouldn't.
I understand.
But you could dress her up in anything that you liked.
It's at the end. Basically, she's brain dead. He goes, okay. Do you does anyone want the body? It's so creepy at the end of it.
Oh, he was on it, wasn't he? Yeah.
God.
But isn't it mad though? Because he's a billionaire and he could have any woman, but the only woman he
He could
wanted
have any woman's body, couldn't he?
have.
He chose to have hers.
Yeah.
Got to cut that bit, haven't
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
I? Don't
Can't say
give me
anything.
edits. I can't do edits.
Can't
I'm
say
not.
anything.
I tell you what, I'm not gonna edit it. I'm just gonna mute you for that section, so that people can see you've done it, and then but I'm in the clear.
Yeah, we're going to have to put some trigger warnings on this one.
Yeah.
Contains outdated humour.
Yeah. Well, we are
Funny
discussing
humour, though.
an old story, aren't we? Things have moved.
Yeah.
Things have moved a lot since this was
And,
written.
and that's something we should actually address, that the transformation scenes. I mean, for 1990, it was incredibly progressive.
Yeah.
And although you may feel that it's slightly ham-fisted, Kieran, at times, it really is worlds apart of what anyone else was writing in British comics at the time.
Oh, yes. I mean,
Perhaps apart from Grant Morrison.
I can appreciate the fact that it was groundbreaking, because I think that's just not just in comics, but even in media in general. And also, I think it was good that they gave this sort of transformation scenario a go, because it wasn't something that was humorous. It was something that was meant to be taken seriously. Because, of course, previously when you would watch, sitcoms and things, a man dressed up as a woman was always a source for laughter, whereas this is handled with, seriousness.
Yeah.
And we have to also,
the old switcheroo.
But we do need to discuss the fact that he's not transforming because he felt that way. He transforms as a matter of control. So it's not strictly something that's
positive, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an odd one. It's like I said, it's kind of a form of penance. So he always sees what he's done is how he explains it, but at the same time, there is that real sort of just ultimate control point there, which is
yeah, it's a bit Jeffrey Dahmer, isn't it?
Bit iffy. Yeah. It's great though, great ending, and
It certainly didn't need a sequel. I'm glad they did one, but it certainly never needed a sequel at all.
No,
it told the story and it finished it well.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Like I say, I'm actually grateful that Alan put that idea forward. It's
thanks.
Good idea.
Good one.
Yeah, cheers, Alan. Good call, mate.
We're going to try and do Insurrection, but we can't find the book anywhere.
Yeah, I haven't got Insurrection either.
No. So is that the end?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah.
56 minutes.
Everyone's run out of steam.
Don't know about that, mate. Do you want to do a quick pub snacks review?
No.
Oh. That's true. It's true.
Right. Any closing thought? Would you recommend, Kieran? You had, this was your first experience of both John Wagner, Judge Dredd, and Colin MacNeil's art.
Yeah.
What did you think? I just want a single score out of 10 with no commentary.
Oh!
I find they're the best review.
It gets a solid 10 out of 10 for me. Yeah.
I'm going to give it 9.5 terrorist fundraising buckets out of 10.
I think I'll give it 9. What have you been reading this week, Kieran?
I've actually been reading a book about the history of geriatrics during wartime, like how they managed and so on.
Is that
like acts of
German
bravery.
soldiers that can score 3 goals? Geriatrics.
No, very good. No, it's about some old folks that perform acts of bravery and courage during wartime. And it's a great book. I recommend everyone look for it. Old Spunkers, it's called.
Who is your daddy and what does he do?